Hello, everybody, and welcome to Inky Thoughts. Today, we're going to be diving a bit more into, you could say, the nitty-gritty of tattoos and what they might mean to people and what they certainly mean to both me and my very awesome guest. Many of you might actually have seen him if you follow tattoo social media or anything like that these days. He's making some waves, I would argue. The Ink Shrink, also known as Matt Davis. Matt, would you like to tell people a bit more about who you are?
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. This is great. So Matt Davis, Ink Shrink. I am a psychiatrist by training, hence the term shrink and the ink shrink. I thought it was pretty clever when I came up with that. Um, Tattoo collector. I've been working on my collection for about 10 years now. Right now, I have work from 26 artists, and I've got about 500, almost 550 hours of work in, and pretty much finished off my bodysuit. So I've been trying to be a big advocate for the tattoo community, and especially kind of knocking down barriers for tattooed people in professional settings and my fellow physicians. I'm a big believer that people should be able to live lives true to themselves and shouldn't be pigeonholed into looking a certain way just because they work in certain fields.
Yeah, I mean, that's what drew me to you as well. Not just your amazing bodysuit, which I'm also jealous of some of the artists you've worked with. There's some quite well-known names in the tattoo world that have put their art on your body. But it was also this idea you have, just like me, that it seems strange that at least still when you get heavily tattooed, there's still this idea that, oh, you've gone too far. Why would you look like that? Where it's, as I've always seen it, even before I went into sociology later in my life, I've always seen it as we're just trying to look like who we want to look like being yourself in a way. Yet people can't seem to, like, there's a certain place I feel where you break down people's almost like in a way the sense of security about the world around them. You're suddenly pushing the barriers, and that pushes their understanding in a way. I'm not entirely certain, but yeah, like it's almost like your comfortability with looking this way and going against the grain, so to speak, makes other
Mhm.
people uncomfortable sometimes without them really realizing why. Almost it makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's probably for a couple of reasons. I think that tattoos for me have really helped. One of the real benefits is they've helped me feel much more confident in myself. And when you're out there with tattoos, it's not like you have a certain outfit that might be a little bit, shiny or different, or you're wearing sparkly shirt or crazy shoes. I mean, you're really taking ownership of how you look. And I do think that for certain people that may not have as much self-confidence, like there's an element, probably consciously or not, of some degree of envy and just wishing like man, I wish I could be that committed to something. So that's part of it too. Just, I mean, people have, I think some people have a hard time feeling committed to anything, and to be committed enough to cover yourself with tattoos. And I think the last sort of my response to that is anytime you change somebody's perception of what the world they grew up in, I think that that kind of shocks people. I mean, I've never tattooed myself for the shock factor by any means, but at least in America, and for people of generation, probably the generation older than mine, the baby boomers. I mean, when you talk about a physician, a psychiatrist, they definitely has a certain connotation to it, and I
Mm.
definitely do not fit into that visual image that they have, and so that's scary.
Yeah.
New and different and change is scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, because it seems we seek out in a weird way, similar to how we might seek out. In a way, I can't remember what sociologist talked about this, but one of my favorites I've read about it might have been Michael Reese, a guy I'm also hoping to get on this podcast, when he talked about how they can sort of give you a sense of ontological security. Like you get a sense of like who you are, at least in this world where we cover ourselves in ink, even if they have deep meaning or not. You sort of get more of a sense of confidence from that as well. Like you're at least secure in yourself. Whereas other people seem to seek that out, I think, in knowing the rules of the game, so to speak, and following them. Like they're like, oh, everybody else is wearing this now, so I'll do that as well. And when you then come around, well, you or I for that matter, and then are visibly tattooed and don't really care about that, at least to their perception, then you're sort of pushing at that, sort of pushing back at the system almost in a way, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think the desire for all of us on some level is a level to conform, to not stand out too much. Because if you stand out too much, then you risk, sort of ostracizing yourself from the tribe. I mean, it's a very sort of primitive, we're all kind of tribal in our own way. We don't
Yeah.
want to be kicked out, right? And so for me, right, as I was saying, like the tattoos have sort of come along with the self-confidence. It's not that I'm doing it to stand out. It's honestly for me. It's really about me. And as I've grown older, I've also grown to not care as much about what
Mm.
people think about me. I do very much in a professional setting, and that's why the visible tattoos I have like on my hands, I've tried to keep to be very benign imagery that wouldn't
Aye.
offend people. But beyond that, like when I'm not at work, judge me all you want. I really honestly don't care. It's not that I don't want to be part of the tribe. It's just like if you're going to judge me just based on me, like that's your loss, not mine.
Yeah. No, I fully agree, and I felt the same way. Like, I just attended a PhD in Scotland not long ago, and I noticed there was a completely different culture there when it came to academics. Whereas in Scotland, they're very much like, no, look how you want. We can't see how this is going to affect your career. Whereas when I did my master's degree in my home country, Denmark, I would sometimes get warned, either very directly or indirectly, about, hey, consider how many tattoos you're going to get and whether that's going to affect, how people view you as an academic or in a professional setting. And I'm like, okay, but if I do good work, why should that affect it? I've yet to see any scientific evidence, at least, to suggest that tattooing goes in and changes the chemical balance in the brain or anything like that.
Exactly, exactly. And I'd argue for my line of work as a psychiatrist, where w one of the most important parts of my job is forming a relationship with patients. Because if patient doesn't have a relationship with me, it's going to be hard to make any type of advancement with them. And interestingly, I found that universally the tattoos have been a positive. I mean, that's not to say, I mean, certainly I'm sure there have been some patients who've not liked them, they just haven't said anything. But the number of patients that have said stuff that's been very positive surprised me really. And that's what made me honestly feel more confident when I get my hands and fingers tattooed in the last year and a half or so. But if you'd asked me 5 years ago, I probably would have said, I really can't do that. But then I started to see that when I had some of my visible tattoo work, or if I was working on like a weekend and be wearing more like a polo shirt like this, number of times patients came up to me and just said, you're a lot more like me than I thought. You're not some stuffy white coat, ivory tower academic person. And it's been a real positive. Not only has it not been a negative, it's actually been, I think, beneficial to my career, incidentally.
Well, I haven't had the same, because the professional experience myself. I haven't had much academic work. I've been a bit more lucky in my career since my master's degree, but I still experienced when I did, my master's thesis and did qualitative work interviewing people, that originally people would be like, oh, you maybe want to wear something that might not be. And I thought, all right, I haven't interviewed a lot of people because from a bachelor's interview to two artists. So they wanted to see my tattoos to even talk to me. But even with non-tattooed people, a lot of them were like, oh, well, at least he's, down to earth, it seems. At least he's not just coming here in a tweed suit or something, and I'm going to be on a fucking bench having him ask really personal questions. So I think you're very much right. No matter what you do, there's sort of a breakdown of the barriers, or like the expectations, that's quite healthy there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and you said something that made me think too. For so long, I think people that look like you and I, there's been this sort of societal connotation of what we're supposed to be like, and I think that also is very unsettling to people when I mean, it sounds weird because it sounds like I'm promoting myself. I'm really not, but I think I'm a pretty good person, and people generally like to be around. And
Yeah.
I think once people who may have a bias against tattoos, once they start to know me, they're almost like, whoa, okay, he's a normal guy. And they don't expect that. I don't know what they think. Maybe in my back, like, sacrificing baby squirrels on an altar or something. But, so I think that shakes people like, well, wait, how do I care? Which box does he fit in? But that's the point. None of us fits in a box.
That's the funny thing, because I found out very quickly, because I mean, originally before I went into academia, I was just, another tattoo loving kid that really wanted to get some ink done and all that. But I did even during my undergrad studies in sociology, I quickly learned that, oh well, this is actually a very culturally transcendent thing we're doing. Like, you can't pinpoint one specific culture or a few of them that, like, oh, they're the ones getting tattooed. It transcends all classes today. It transcends every subculture and every culture. Like, everybody's getting tattooed in that sense. Not in the sense most people assume that now every other person you meet just has a tattoo. There's a lot more of us than in the day, but statistically speaking, it's at most in some countries a third of adults, and in a lot of others it's less than that. But one thing is for certain: every type of person gets them today, I would argue. I mean, absolutely, from the classical biker to comic book and video game nerds like me, like, we all get tattoos. And another thing, what you said made me think of, is that often when people just see me walk down the street, they see a fairly okay, tall and like muscly guy with tattoos. And then when they get closer, there's Star Wars here, there's a manga character here, and all that stuff. And suddenly it's like, oh, that's actually really nice. It's really good, nice looking at that, because it's not just, I don't have some really big bloody skull here or dagger. And even when you have tattoos like that, you can still be an awesome person. But yeah, like, and really friendly. I've met people, as I'm sure you have as well. We've both been to a few conventions. There are people with traditionally quite aggressive, for lack of a better term, tattoos, like in heavy quotation marks, that are still lovely and nice people. That's just the imagery they prefer in their tattoos, and they're often quite reflexive about it as well, I find.
It's the imagery that they prefer, probably for the aesthetic. But I would also, speaking from my own experience, but I imagine that those folks have similar conscious or unconscious thought of it. I feel like tattoos are almost like a filter. Like, if you're going to judge me or reject me because of how I look, I don't probably really want to have much to do with you anyway. And like you're saying, I mean, the people with the most violent, gory, whatever image, tattoo imagery, I've met plenty of them too, where people have extreme, stuff on their face. And I mean, personally, face tattoos aren't my thing, but I do think that they're on the more extreme end of the tattoo spectrum. But people who look, even for me, like, whoa, that's pretty intense. But like you're saying, they're really, you talk to them for 5 minutes and they're nice people. So it's almost like a defense. It's like wearing in armor, honestly, because living is hard. Being a human being is hard, and you never know who in the world may be an enemy or a threat to you. But it's a way of kind of protecting yourself and filtering them out.
Yeah, I even mentioned this in the episode I did with Robbie not too long ago, where we were talking about tattoos and what they do for people. Because he's also, even as a tattoo artist, a heavy believer in that it can help heal people. Like, I know you are as well. But I also mentioned there what he said, he even sees this as a tattoo artist, that people just trying to claim, like, carve their own little right to belong in a way. It's not even reclaiming, because for some people it's not even doesn't even have to do with trauma or anything like that. But you just want to carve out that, hey, I'm not like everybody else. I'm just gonna claim this space, my body, as mine. Like that's the bastion here, like that. And I think that's very confidence building that we've talked about. That they're sort of claiming their right to be who they want to be by sort of putting it in people's face in a way. Also,
I agree. I think in some ways that I had a post on my Instagram about this maybe a week or two ago. But one of the ironic, I don't know if ironic is the right word, but one of the unexpected things certainly is that I agree with you. It's kind of staking your claim in the world, but it's also, I think that to certain people, it's almost like you're giving your body to them. Like, you become a walking art museum for them to consume you, literally the art on you. And sometimes it leads to uncomfortable situations where people are, touching me, or, I mean, the number of times that, people have literally pulled up my shorts, like if they're looking at something, or pulled up my shirt or my sleeve to get a better look. I mean, I'm pretty easygoing. I thankfully I don't have any like significant trauma history or anything, but God, if I did, and for people who do,
yes,
it'd be pretty uncomfortable. So
harrowing, actually. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, you're kind of staking out your claim in the world, but to some people, you're also becoming almost like a commodity to consume at the same
Yeah,
time.
which I always found weird. I mean, because I haven't been able to explain it too much from a sociological perspective, but it is strange how suddenly, because you've made your body look different in a way, people suddenly feel that they can just touch or grab or
Hmm.
look like they feel like suddenly you are public display in a way, and not just appearance wise. Because fine if they look, most of us deal quite well with that, especially the ones of us who paced ourselves somewhat, who haven't just gone out at 18 and just done the whole body. But most of us, we're fine with the stares. It sort of comes with it. We do look different. Most of us have enough reflexive thought to acknowledge that, yeah, we don't look like the average bear. But the touching thing is strange still. And
It
and
is.
and I've had, like you, I've had more than one shirt ruined because people have to see the chest and, oh, how much is there? How far does it go? Like, instead of just asking, hey, do you mind showing me? And then some people respect it and other people don't respect it when you say, nope, not right now.
Yeah, it really, it's not a thought that would ever enter my mind. I mean, I'm healing some script on the side of my hand, and I was at a party last weekend with one of our neighbors, and he was looking it over. He actually has an accent a little bit like yours. He's from Holland.
All
So the
right.
two of you kind of sound familiar. So so I feel like your voice too. I feel like I'm almost talking to him. But anyway, yeah. So it was healing at that time, and he just kind of reached over and he was rubbing it, and he said,
Ooh,
"Oh, this is cool. This is like a 3D tattoo." And I'm like, "No, it's not
nope, nope.
3D. It's healing. And actually, could you please leave it alone?" So yeah, I guess it comes with the territory. It was definitely unexpected for me
I
though. I
just feel
never would
extra sorry, especially for women or people that are not, a big cisgendered man like myself, because that must be really daunting sometimes when people, because there'll be big dudes sometimes as well that just grab you out of nowhere, and then you're like, whoa, what the? Hey man, can you leave the shirt alone? I would like to get home clothed. Like,
have. Exactly, exactly.
but it's
Funny.
strange. Like, it's sort of in a bad way breaks down a barrier, at least in their head, that suddenly they are allowed to touch. And once said to a
Yeah.
guy, and I'm not trying to be crass, but once said to a guy that wouldn't get it in a bar here in Copenhagen, that, okay, so let's say I was a woman and I've gotten breast augmentation. Would you then go and grab them out of nowhere? He said, no, that would be sexism. And I said, all right, well, I'm happy we agree there, first of all. Second of all, why is it different with the tattoos?
Yeah, that's a great point, a great comparison. Although I have to say there are probably some people that would have said yes to that, sadly.
Yeah, sadly,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
those are the people we stay away from.
As much as possible. Yeah, but this is what I mean. Like this is exactly what you and I were talking about just a minute ago. I feel like um tattoo, in the world of psychology, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a
No, no,
psychiatrist.
no,
There's a
no.
bit of a difference, but in the world of psychology, there's what's called projective testing.
Mm.
The classic example is the Rorschach, the ink blot test, the things that everybody thinks look like bats. um, uh, but it's called projective testing because basically when you're asked to describe the imagery, the ink blots have been around studied enough that certain responses correlate with certain personality characteristics and other potential psychiatric diagnoses. And I feel somewhat like my tattoos, not so much the imagery itself, although to some extent, but just how visibly covered I am. It's almost like a walking projective test, is what I feel like. Like how I am and how people respond to me actually gives me a lot of information about them, which
Yeah.
is very helpful for my line of work, right? Because a lot of the communication, a lot of the data I collect on people isn't necessarily spoken. Oftentimes it's not spoken.
Yeah.
But if I can pull that out through some other means, and I argue that the tattoos are a way of doing that, it does, right? Because I mean, the people that have touched you, right? Like it kind of gives you an idea of what their
Yeah,
personality
yeah,
might
yeah.
be like. Like I, in a million years, would never touch another person
Oh, same.
without asking them, right? And I'm not saying it's right or wrong or I'm good for not doing that, but it people who do feel
Yeah.
the liberty to go and touch somebody they don't know, I mean that is a personality trait.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny when you say it like that, because it becomes quite clear when you explain it like that. But yeah, it is definitely, it sort of gives you a slight window, as much as they think tattoos might give them a window into how we might be as people. It also gives us a window into them, like of how they are. And I've even met people with not too many tattoos. Like I had one exchange with a person, I can't remember who they exactly were, where they suddenly grabbed my arm, my full sleeve, and wanted to, like, and turned it and wanted to look, and they haven't even spoken to me yet. And they had tattoos themselves. So I said, well, how, like, if I touch your tattoos? Oh, I'm fine with that. And I said, okay, but I might not be. So why would, like, you must have encountered this. I can't be the first tattoo person you've met. You've got tattoos, you know. But
Yep.
it still gives you a look in. Like, I think very much so. You're right. It sort of is a personality trait that I don't think it's might not just be the tattoos. It could be anything really
Hmm.
that stands
Exactly.
out to them as uh, unnormal, or how you would put it. Like,
Yep. Yep.
yeah. So, not to skip away from this very interesting topic, but I'm kind of curious. How did you get into tattoos yourself, Matt?
Uh, what I recall is that I'm a big sports fan, and growing up,
Mm.
I was reading an article in Sports Illustrated about Shaquille O'Neal, and I was probably about 14 or 15. It was either late middle school or early high school. And Shaq was interviewed. He had just gotten his sort of infamous Superman tattoo on his bicep. And this is at a time, I mean, a lot of professional athletes nowadays across all sports really are pretty,
Yeah.
a number of them are pretty heavily tattooed. But back, 20, 30 years ago, I don't recall them by and large having as much tattoo work as they do. So Shaq to me was sort of like at the forefront of it. And he talked about his experience getting tattooed and how painful it was, and yet how he, and sort of the what he went through with his mom in particular, and how she wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of it, but how he kind of reconciled that with her, and how going through all of that, he instantly wanted to get another tattoo. And it left such an impression on me. I thought Shaq's this gigantic badass guy, and like this is when Shaq was like, I mean, I know Michael Jordan was huge, but Michael Jordan was number one. Shaq was not far behind him on the
No,
coolness
no, no, no,
factor.
no.
And so I thought, man, like this badass guy, this gigantic muscular dude is like coming out and admitting that this really hurt a lot, but that he's also like really thinks it's this really cool thing that he did. So it just left this impression on me. And for whatever reason, throughout my high school years, I remember I would look at different things and like think like, could this translate into a tattoo? I mean, this is, going back a ways when tattoos were in general much simpler. And I remember I would just sketch things out. I'm not a very good artist, but I would sketch like, oh, this could be cool. This could be cool. And I remember we went my senior year in high school, we went on a class trip to France. And for some reason, I'm not exactly sure why, I was under the impression that it would be easier for me to get tattooed there, even though I wasn't 18. I don't know. It didn't happen.
Okay,
But
fair.
nonetheless, as soon as I turned 18 and went off to college, I got my first tattoo then.
Okay.
And yeah, like you were saying, I mean, nowadays tattoos are sort of seen across all classes and jobs and cultures. Back then, I was like an N of one. I mean, there was not, even though it was a small little, about that big tribal sun tramp stamp. uh,
Sorry,
I
Matt.
was, I mean, that's what it was. It was, by the way, just as a very quick aside, they were not called tramp stamps at the
No,
time.
they weren't. No, no, that came
But
much later.
it came much later, the name and also the location. Like it was about 5, 6, 7 years after that the classic,
Mm.
the young women started getting them on their lower back. So whatever happened with the tramp stamp like trajectory, that was that wasn't me. But anyway, yeah. So I mean, I was just like kind of this outlier in my friend group and my college group. But I remember thinking like, well, this is kind of cool because
Mm.
I'm different and it feels kind of cool to be different.
Mm.
Um, but not in a way not bad different, I guess, right?
Okay.
Not ostracized or weird weird different. So that's really where it started.
Yeah, that was sort of the same for me. Like, I
Hmm.
can't remember exactly how I got fascinated in them. My dad told me a fun story of how I almost grabbed the arm of some biker as a baby together with my twin brother because we wanted to look at the tattoos on his arm. And we loved the transfer tattoos you got in gum packets back in the day. Like, that was the best thing for us, more than anything else in the world. So that's sort of how it started for me at a very small, like, young age. And then later on, shows came about when I was in my early teens, like Miami Inc. and LA Inc. and all those shows. And then you were like, oh, wow, it's really come a long way, because we used to, just see them on people where I was like, whoa, that's gone green now and stuff like that. And then you saw the new stuff, and it baffled me what you could do with it. And then I just was
Yeah,
so certain, even from 14. I waited because I've always been a massive nerd. So I very much waited till I was 18. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And very shortly after, got my first tattoos. Not the best. I've never regretted it, but not the best done. Also a tribal, because I was a kid of the 90s. So I got a tribal done on my chest, of course. And yeah, then I was off to the races from there. Yeah.
yeah, it's funny how they for a lot of us they become. I mean, I don't know. I'm using the term addictive, not clinically, but just sort
Yeah.
of more colloquially. But yeah, I think that it's the case for a lot of us. I mean, a lot of us don't stop at one. What's interesting, I think, for me, perhaps a little bit, is I got my first, that one I was talking about, and then within about a year or two, I get two others, one on my upper arm on each side. And then after that, I didn't get tattooed again for probably almost 15 years.
Wow.
And I took this really long break. And it wasn't until after my daughter was born that I wanted to get something to commemorate her. But kind of like what you were saying, it made me think of this. Like I hadn't really paid that much attention to the tattoo world during that 15 or so year period. And when I came back about 10 years ago and saw what was possible, I mean, I grew up in the time like, you get Flash. I mean, there was not a lot of custom tattooing available, at least that I had ever been aware of. And I mean, most of what I knew was sort of traditional and some of the Asian inspired work. So when I started researching tattoos about 10 years ago and saw like realism stuff and new school stuff, and I was blown away.
I mean, it is quite like your suit is sort of like a good showcase of what is possible today, because there is some of the pieces on there that they make their rounds around the Instagram, for example, because of how beautiful they are. Like, they're really incredible. I'm not gonna ask Matt to take off his shirt or anything like that. We're just talking about. You can easily go on his Instagram, the Ink Shrink, and view his amazing work he has on his body. But it is quite incredible. Like, mine shows it off in another way, with the new traditional and the new school pieces and how colorful they are. And yours showed up with the level of detail that could be in a piece, like in a different way. And that's so incredible with all different styles in that. And I even think that feeds into, like, we were talking about how they can sort of show off a little bit about you. You can't, like, of course, they can be read wrong. Not everybody can know exactly what you mean behind a tattoo unless they talk to you. But it still sort of shows off as well what your taste is in a way, the kind of
Yeah,
tattoos you get.
exactly. Yeah, no, and it's so interesting because as when I started, I guess collecting, I didn't really kind of consider it that so much at the time, but I, I was very fixated on like kind of real color realism, surrealism stuff, and I really didn't see the appeal of a lot of the other styles. And oddly, as I filled my body up more and have essentially run out of room for all intents and purposes, or most of my canvas, I've really developed a significant appreciation for styles, and even styles I probably still wouldn't do on myself, even if I
No.
had the room. But like I can look at like traditional work now. For example, I don't have any traditional work, and I can, just be blown away by how good it is, like just how much it pops. And so like
Absolutely.
that's been like one of the really cool things about like really becoming immersed in the tattoo
Mm.
world.
That's the thing I found as well when I started going to conventions at first. That I think I was 25 before I went to my first convention, actually. And it's just, that was the thing. Like, you got a whole lot of appreciation for all the different things and how they looked on people's bodies and all the different styles and what they mean to people. And how people put their own, no matter what style it is, you'll find artists that put their own spin on it and do their own thing with it. Even in realism, where a lot of people think, oh, well, it's just going to be the same as the photo, it's just going to be the same as this. People do so much with it, but it's just not that. It's not just a replication of a picture or something like that, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think probably my favorite tattoo on myself, if it's not my favorite, it's definitely at the very top of the list, is I have an exploding skull on my ribs, like in outer space. And the artist that did that is Dimitri Vision in Colorado. And what drew me to him was that his realism style is it has this very painterly feel to it.
Mm.
And even on my piece, especially in this part of the skull at the top where it's exploding, I mean, like you're saying, it's these things I think that are more subtle that you don't start to necessarily, at least I didn't start to appreciate until I really got into tattooing a lot more. Like, but to your point, even within these categories that sound fairly specific, color realism, I mean, there's still such a broad range of how an artist is going to interpret it.
Well, as you're talking about that, an exploding sun, we don't have imagery of that he can pull off in that way and like get a precise thing. You can't just look out the window and then luckily see an exploding sun. So that's also up to his imagination and then putting a realism spin on it, an exploding sun. That's incredible stuff, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's one of those things where, I sent him the idea and I had kind of a rough vision in my head of what it would look like. And when he showed me what he had drawn up, I was like, yeah, that definitely hits what I was going for, but it's also like 1,000 times better. So
Yeah,
it's kind of surreal, really, when you think about thinking of this from sort of a psychological standpoint, when somebody has the ability to render something better than you yourself have envisioned, and it's your idea,
absolutely.
actually, like, wait a minute, that was my idea, and you not only ran with this weird idea, you did it so much better than I ever could have, even if I had the artistic
Absolutely.
ability, which is just so cool.
Well, that's the thing. Like for most of my tattoos, I don't ever send in reference images. I just, if I like the style, I just say, for example, with my vampire I have on the outside of this arm, I just said, yeah, it's difficult to see, but yeah,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I just
Oh,
said
very
to
cool.
her,
Yep.
you know what? I love your style. I want a vampire lady. I like dark-haired women. That was it. And she made me a very beautiful, very awesome dark-haired vampire lass, as she would say, because it was in Scotland. And she, despite being Slovenian, has lived there so long that she loves the colloquialisms and all that. So yeah, but it was awesome. And I think that's also part, like you spoke on your Instagram not too long ago about the healing with the pain and how it translates trauma and stuff like that. But I think part of it's also this cooperation you make with the artist, at least for some of us. The whole thing with like having an idea you both sort of develop and then they render it into a tactile, drawing and physical appearance that you put on your body. To me, that's also quite a big part of it. Like finding the imagery that speaks to that, whatever it is that made you want that tattoo as well, you know?
Yeah, it's the connection, 100%. I mean, you said that so well. The connection that you form with, or bond that you form with the artist. Even, I mean, the relationship that we have with artists is so unique because it's kind of a very intimate relationship. I mean, they're altering how you look, and we're so defined um, by our appearance. So the level of trust that we put in somebody, and then also the fact that they're inflicting a significant amount of pain.
Mm.
But then again, it's like even if you go to somebody for like a project like a sleeve or a back piece, I mean, you're gonna spend what few hours, few dozen hours with them, and then oftentimes you may never see them or talk to them again. So it's it's a relationship that I feel like is kind of unlike any other relationship that I
Yeah,
can
because you
think
still,
of.
you get very intimate, as you say, in those hours, and you get quite close, and you talk, and you all that stuff.
Yeah, I think another thought that I've had on it too, and like why I think tattoos are so appealing for us collectors is um, we carry a piece of the artist with us,
Mm.
like their personality too. And what I mean by that is we all perceive, like kind of what I was just talking about, this piece that Dimitri did for me on my ribs. Like I had an idea, he had an idea, and basically, an artist is going to render something based on how they perceive the world, and then they're going to put that on you. And ultimately, then you are sort of a representation to everybody around you for how that artist perceives the world. So you really are kind of carrying a little piece of each artist with you, I think, forever. So I feel like I'm a blend of the 26 artists that have tattooed me.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in a much cruder way to put it, you sort of also become a billboard for their word. Like you are the art gallery. They've hung their art. Well, not in this case, that would be very brutal, but on, you know.
Yeah, that would be brutal.
Yeah, that is a correction I made with somebody about their grammar the other day, where because they very much confused me because they said, "Oh, how many tattoos do you have in you?" And I was like, "Not in, not in, on, very much on me."
Yeah, that's funny.
It's very much put in the skin, but not on the in the body.
Right, right. Oh God, that would be brutal.
Mm. Also, that's where I would. Do you think there would be any point to that? Because that'll be the same as how I see certain blind people that get tattoos. Anyways, I'm very fascinated to find out one day, maybe interview somebody about why a blind person would want, tattoos, because it's a very visual
Mhm.
art form. But there must be some reason, and I think it might be quite profound. But then, if you could get tattoos on the inside, like I think the closest you get to that are people that get it on the roof of their mouth, for example.
Yeah,
Like that, there's
yeah,
certain times where even I sit there and think, okay, I have a hard time defending the actual purpose.
yeah, yeah. I know. It's not an area that I would ever personally choose to do either. But I don't, I don't judge because I don't
No, no,
want
no,
to.
no, not at all.
Yeah,
But it
and I'm
fascinates
not
me,
saying
in a
you.
way because you, you would want to at least be able to see it, or
Mhm.
other people to see it. But then getting something, inside your mouth, nobody can see it unless you. I mean, you could see a picture of it when it's been done.
Yeah.
You'd have to do some sort of headstand if you wanted people to actually look at it with light on it.
Yeah, no, but you're right because I mean all the work I have on my back and the backs of my legs. I mean, I never see. I mean, which is it's kind of weird in that sense. Like the whole world around me sees stuff like, and I've like you said. I mean, I've literally never seen like I have a piece from Nico Hurtado, who's probably one of the more well-known people that's tattooed me. It's on
I,
a beautiful piece in the back of my thigh, but I mean, I can't really actually see it. I mean, if I stand in a mirror or take a picture.
I mean,
So
we do
yeah.
get quite fond of full-length mirrors when you get very tattooed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Got to be able to take it all in.
That's the thing. Like, you almost want other people to take a picture of it sometimes so you can see it. Like,
Well, it's funny you say that though, because the number of people now that like want to take pictures with me, I
mm-hmm.
mean, it I'm like I think a fairly sort of reserved, like a more introverted than extroverted for
Yeah.
sure. And I never in a million years would have guessed like I would have had some of the interactions that I've had. And I mean, people who come up to me now, I was at a convention a couple months ago and this gentleman came up and introduced himself and he was like, I follow you on Instagram and whatever. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's cool. And then he came back a little bit later on. He's like, honestly, he's like, this is so cool. Like, you made my weekend. I can't believe I'm getting to speak with
Nice.
you. Can I take a picture with you? Blah, blah. I'm thinking, like, me?
Yeah.
um, you know, so yeah, I mean, just, you go into this like kind of having certain expectations or reasons for why you're doing what you're doing. And then
Mm.
I guess as with anything in life, there's also all the unexpected. And the vast majority of it has been good or worse neutral, but interesting regardless.
I mean, speaking of that, I did love, and if anybody listens to this and hasn't seen this video, it's one of my personal favorites you did with your favorite comment you received and your reaction
Oh
to it,
yeah.
which I thought was quite brilliant and very poignant as well. Where it just reminded me of how I once said to somebody, "They're not gonna come off if you keep staring at me." Like,
Yeah, 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 exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what people think that have those types of reactions, or the like you're talking about the woman that told me that I was extreme and I don't know all this that I was turning myself into an animal and
yeah,
whatnot.
that
Okay.
was just wild to me as well. Like
Hmm.
that's one
Hmm.
of the, I mean, my personal favorite reaction I've had. Now, my favorite reaction was an older lady in Glasgow who actually asked me to take. I was wearing these headphones with the music, just walking through the botanical garden in that city, and she went over. And normally in Denmark, when an old lady pokes at me and wants to talk to me, it's usually to tell me off for having tattoos. But this woman told me, and she might have been in her early 70s, late 60s. She was like, "I couldn't stop you without telling you the tattoos are beautiful, and I just
Hmm.
hope you keep going." And I said, "You don't have to worry
Oh,
there. Like, you don't have to worry there. I absolutely keep going." Yeah, that was just
yeah.
I rarely experienced that, but that's also Denmark, to my experience at least. I'm not going to color anybody else's. And I think some of my more heavily tattooed people I know here would agree. It's more culturally conservative than a lot of the rest of Northern Europe and Scandinavia, especially more than Scotland. So there, they're just way more like, "Oh, you look how you want." Like, we don't care. Like, really, I've met bankers in Scotland that have like small face tattoos or hand tattoos and stuff like that. I've never seen that in Denmark. I've
Huh.
met bankers with tattoos, but they have to be suit camouflaged.
Yeah.
Like
Covered.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But that I'll be really curious actually. Hopefully you and I can maintain a relationship going
Oh, I
forward.
would
And
absolutely
y-
love that.
yeah, and I'll be really curious to see what you perceive in Denmark in terms of like, does that change and how quickly does that change? Because
I'll
I feel
say
like,
it has changed a bit. Like I've left a bit of a background for me here, I guess. I left to do the PhD 19 months ago. I came back here in late July this year after I realized that wasn't for me and I didn't have the money to continue. That's a longer story that involves Brexit. And for the British listeners, if there are any, I'm not going to talk about Brexit, don't worry. But so I couldn't afford it and I had to go home because of the new rules and all that. But when I got home, I noticed even just in that 1.5 years that it had changed for the positive. It's still worse than other places I've been. There is more judgment here, even in bigger cities like Copenhagen, but it's definitely way better than it was even 1.5 years, even 19 months ago. That it might be
mhm.
going somewhat the right direction here. And
Yeah, I
even
mean,
my uncle, who's a big CEO type millionaire type guy, not that I see any privilege from that, so to speak, but even he, who's been very conservative about this and have been very outspoken about not liking my tattoos, said to my mother not long ago that he didn't see any problems with that in the job market. Like they'd hire anybody, even with tattoos now, which
mhm.
he's never said before. So that was interesting.
That is, I mean, I think to some extent, this sort of all of this fallout from COVID and
Mm.
workforce shortages that are kind of being seen globally, when people are trying to recruit for jobs, what I mean, like one of the bigger things here in the United States is yeah, police now are
Mm.
they're people in the military. I mean, I don't know all of the rules, but at
No, no.
least from my observations, I've seen pretty heavily tattooed. I mean, I saw a police
Yeah.
officer a couple of months ago in New York. He had two sleeves, stuff on his neck going up the back of
Nice.
his head. And, I think even 5 years ago, you'd never see such a thing. So I think that
Yeah.
one of maybe the positives of the pandemic and all of the negative things that it created, but is that it's forced people to kind of reconcile the fact like, look, if you want to hire somebody, like, are you really not going to hire a qualified person
Mm.
just because they're tattooed? Like, you are absolutely cutting off your nose to spite your face
Because,
to,
yeah, but
in
that's also
doing
like
that.
I always thought of the example of like if somebody falls over in the airport with a heart attack and they say, "Hey," the classic example, "Is there a doctor here?" And somebody with a face tattoo comes over and says, "I'm a doctor," and then this dying man's just gonna lie down and say, "Not you, not you."
Right,
Like
right.
you are the only person you're harming in that scenario. If somebody's there capable of saving your life or helping you, like in your profession as well. Like I remember I heard the old Howard Stern clip where you called into his radio show and he said, "Oh, I don't want my doctor tatted up." And the only thought I had there was, okay, so if a man is actually capable of helping you, you're suffering from quite severe mental distress enough to have to go to a hospital in the mental ward of a hospital to get help, the psychiatric ward, and then you're going to be like, "Oh, he might be the qualified, but no, he's got tattoos." Like the only person you're harming in that equation is yourself.
Exactly, right. It is. It's so self-defeating. And I didn't have Howard is a very challenging person to talk to because it's his
Oh,
show and
yeah,
he lets you
imagine
talk
so.
when, when he wants to and talks over you when he doesn't want you to get your point in. But you know, what he was saying, how much of what he's doing is just shtick versus what he actually believes, I don't really know. But you know, one of the things he kept coming back to is, well, if you're a doctor, you're in medical school, you should just be studying all the time. That's all you should be doing, and reading and studying and learning. I tried to make this point. I think it fell on deaf ears, and I don't mean to like be tooting my own horn, but I was like, I graduated in the top 10% of my medical school class. I was in the medical school honor society. I get like 95th plus percentile on my boards. I went to a Harvard residency program. Like, and that's not ordinarily I talk about myself. Like, I'm not like a big self promoter.
No, no, no,
but I
no,
remember
no.
thinking like, what more could you really want from me? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, to your point, like if that's not good enough for you, like I mean I guess it's your loss. Like would you rather go to somebody that graduated at the bottom of their medical school class that didn't have all of those accolades
But
just
they
because
look
they
the
weren't
part.
tattooed?
Like
Right, right. Like that's so stupid.
it becomes a costume party rather than you actually wanting help. Then it becomes you having certain expectations you want met rather than actually really wanting expert opinion help. You know.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
as my I'm very proud of where I'm from. As my plumber dad would say, would you really go in and tell a guy how to fix your toilet if he knows how to fix it? Like that's a weird thing as well. I would never tell somebody, oh, are you fixing my roof? Well, I think you should do it this way. I know nothing about roofing. Why would I do that? You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
The same principle here. Why are you gonna go in and say, oh, you can't be a psychiatrist, Matt, with all those tattoos? How would you know? Are you a psychiatrist? Why are you here then if you are a psychiatrist? You know?
But like I was talking about earlier, you know, it's like we are walking projective tests, and it draws personality traits out of people. And Howard is, this isn't coming from me specifically. Like I can't diagnose somebody I haven't formally
No.
assessed in person, but he himself has admitted that he is a narcissist. And I mean, he certainly has a number of pretty evident narcissistic traits. And so that's the whole thing, right? Like I don't look in his mind like how a doctor that's taking care of him should look. A doctor taking care of a narcissist like him should look a certain way. And like it's not enough that I went to a Harvard residency. I should look like somebody that went to a Harvard residency, whatever that means in his mind. It's a suit, it's a Rolex watch, it's whatever, I guess.
That's
So
what
yeah.
there's a guy you might like from that I met in person actually at a conference on tattoo research while I was still attempting my PhD earlier this year, who called Tom. I can't remember his last name, but his handle, so to speak, is Tom Rocks Maths, and he's a math professor at Oxford, younger than me even, so he might be only in his very early 30s like myself, but covered in tattoos. And he's still at the top of it. He's running a house. He's got prestigious jobs and positions at Oxford. World-renowned, you know, and yet even I just saw he was in the British Evening News at some point, and even he was talking about how he still catches stigma and these perceptions like, oh, you're a math professor, why do you look like this? And he's into emo rock and stuff like that and metal, so he also looks, you know, punk rocky and that, and people are like, well, you can't look like this, you're a math professor, why can't he look like this? He does math, and he does it well enough to have a professorship. I think it's a professorship, but he's at least, you know, way above PhD. And you know, working at Oxford, another institution that, much like Harvard, really is for most people a stamp of like, oh well, we can't do much better right here, can we? Like,
well, maybe his mistake and my mistake is we don't actually have it tattooed on us. Maybe I need to get like the Harvard H, and he can get like the Oxford symbol.
Well,
somewhere.
you do have
maybe that would be
shrink
good
on
enough.
your hand now, so I mean,
I
maybe
do,
it will
yeah,
help.
yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly. It would be weird if people take it as a command, like shrink.
Shrink, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, how, Professor?
Yeah.
But I mean, but it is strange, you know, because it's very much, as we've talked about throughout this, it's very much people's own expectations and how these, as I would say, socially constructed ideas of like, that's what a doctor is, that's what this is. It's the same stuff that keeps misogyny and all these old illicit zombie terms alive and ideas and that, you know.
It is, but I have a lot of hope though, because I feel
Oh,
like
same.
younger generations are so much more about like self-empowerment and living a life true to yourself and
Mm.
support. Like it's been such a change in our lifetimes, in
Oh
my
yeah.
lifetime. I mean, I think a lot about like the sexuality issues and
Mm.
like, I mean, it wasn't that long ago in the United States that like gay marriage was like, oh my God, how gay it's gonna, that
Oh
society's
yeah.
gonna crumble if gay people marry, right? And finally, we get legislation and gay people can get married, and like, the world hasn't fallen apart. So like all of those people were made to really look as stupid as they sounded back then. But
Mm.
what's just so encouraging to me now is how much more aware we are of
Yeah.
like, people's lived experiences and
Mm.
how they want to be viewed, and even if it's not something that you personally can relate to, respecting that person for who they are and just letting them live their life.
And I think with how, as you said as well, we are as humans, even for people that might say, "Oh, I don't care much about appearance," we do sort of react to each other's appearances. That's the first thing we sort of do. It's sort of built into us, and I think it's very good that I think tattoos are actually paving the way a bit here because everybody meets
Hmm.
it no matter what culture they're in, and then if people can accept that, then it in a positive way becomes a slippery slope to them accepting, oh, you might have pink hair, or you might have this, or you might have these piercings, or you might whatever you do with your appearance, and that's my. I mean, I'm hopeful like you. I very much hope that someday, one day, it's gonna be like, oh yeah, your bank teller might have fucking gauges and a massive nose ring and tattoos and a split tongue because why not? Like,
Right.
it doesn't prevent them from doing it. I get if they cut off both hands for some aesthetic reason and don't get any prosthetics, might be a bit difficult to work that computer. But
Right. Right.
if you don't do anything to yourself that physically prevents you from doing a job, and I'm gonna do it for a book I want to write, and I've already secured an actor for it. But I might actually ask him or somebody else on this as well, because many people would use that as like, oh, but you got to be a chameleon here, and you got to change and be all these different people in movies and TV shows and that. But even actors we see today get lots of tattoos, many of them,
Hmm.
and sometimes quite extensively. And I would personally hypothesize at least that it might exactly be because they have to be all these different people that they wanna, in the words of one of my favorite sociologists to research, who's Paul Sweetman, and he said this back in 1999, that they sort of anchor your sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
And I very
Makes a
much
lot of
agree with that
sense.
statement. Yeah. And I think if you are an actor, if you're being all these different people, fictional or otherwise, maybe it's very nice then to go home and when you take off your shirt, you're like, oh yeah, it's still me there. It's still whoever you might be, you know?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I had never thought of it like that, but yeah, that does make quite a bit of sense actually. Yeah, it's a grounding thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think very much is a grounding thing as well to as much as it's also a healing thing, which I also very much agree with. It's also just this thing where you like you get this more bigger sense of self. And I think that's where, as you've talked about, and I've also felt myself when you get a new tattoo, sometimes you do get a sense of confidence. But I think that comes from this reassuredness of yourself.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
sometimes it's even in the face, especially in your generation, also me earlier on, at least when I started getting tattoos, it's also, you get this confidence despite the adverse opinions you might get on the street. Like, despite that, despite the negative comments or what you might get, you still get this boost in a sense of security about yourself, I think.
Yeah, well, and to some extent, it's almost like a very extreme form of exposure therapy. I mean,
Mm,
for somebody like me who didn't necessarily have a lot of self-confidence in a lot of ways growing up, um, like you're putting yourself out there, like I am now. Um, like I'm kind of exposing myself to, or like even on my Instagram, for example, I talked about this to some extent about some like the body image issues I'd had historically, and like I go to these tattoo conventions where I'm not wearing much clothes, or some of the posts on Instagram are just trying to show off the tattoo work. And it's like, all right, you know what? Here I am. And yeah, I've heard some negative comments, and and that's social media is kind of rife for
mm.
that to happen. And it's funny because the first couple comments I had, I was like, oh, ouch, ouch, ouch. And then like as it's gone along, I'm like, whatever, like, you know what, I've survived, like I've heard that your negative stupidity and I'm still here. And so yeah, it is empowering in that way.
Yeah.
Actually, the haters, for lack of a better word, they actually give it more power, like
Mm.
make me feel
Yeah,
more
because
powerful and
I
more
think we
confident.
disconnect ourselves from them even before the hateful comments because you're already like, well, I'm trying to be me. And this is exactly because of people like you that I want to do
Hmm.
this. Like I was bullied a lot for my appearance and everything when I was in primary school and all that, and even to the point of wanting to kill myself. But don't want to get into too much detail. I'm very open about that because that's a good way to not make it a taboo. But tattoos also helped me sort of reclaim my right to be me and be that little weirdo who
Yes.
liked Star Wars and rock music and comic books and all that shit growing up. There's also like the other
Yeah.
stuff all the others like, but the thing is, I was ostracized both for the red hair and all that stuff, and and everything. And then I just,
Mhm.
when I got older, was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna get tattoos because I like tattoos, and fuck it. But I want to look this way, so I'm gonna look this way, and at least I can say at the end of it that I was myself.
Yeah.
You know.
That's beautifully said. And like, how empowering is that for you, for all the people that ever bullied you and did that type of horrific stuff, that you can own yourself in such an authentic way to just give them like a sort of a virtual middle finger. Like, yeah, you know what? You don't like it, whatever. This is how much I like it. This is how much I like myself that I'm going to do this. And like, by the way, let me know when you feel that confident in yourself, when you love yourself that much that you're going to be able to express yourself like that. Because I'm guaranteeing that the people that gave you a hard time like that just are probably incapable of that, of
Absolutely.
doing that.
But it's also the thing that, like, as you might know, so I don't know if you have many fandom tattoos, but as I've mentioned, I have a couple of fandom tattoos. And the thing is, it's also very freeing to be that into something that you can put your own expression of how you love it on your body and like be proud of
Mhm.
that. Like, because that's why with my Star Wars sleeve, I have original characters that me and my tattoo artist, who were both Star Wars nerds at the time, made
Oh,
up
cool.
based on races I like in that universe and
Oh,
stuff like
cool.
that. And that's because that's exactly it for me. I love my way of enjoying it. And I
Hmm.
like cementing that for myself. That it's like, yeah, cool. There's the logos, but then it's characters that I sort of came up with and I liked it. And I have my own head canon for them and all that stuff.
Yeah. I did that a little bit. My right leg is sort of a horror movie character
Ooh.
themed leg sleeve, and I huge into horror movies since I was a kid, and I tried to
Like all
have
the other
it.
hot tattoo models, like
Yeah. And I tried to have like some like super well-known people characters, and then like some super like not well-known ones.
like that are
But
more in
yeah,
deep cuts, but like the people that know the
yeah, like I've got um from one of Hugh Grant's first movies called Lair of the White Worm, which I'm guessing you probably haven't heard of because most
no.
people haven't. Um, if you're like a horror movie like nerd like me, I mean, you got
Ooh,
to
love
watch
it.
it because it's so good. But yeah, man, I've got this little on my hip, this Timmy B New School, worm, and, sort of in honor of that. But yeah, like some of the pieces I have are sort of like made up. That like in Children of the Corn, the nemesis is called He Who Walks Behind the Rose, and they really don't show him. I mean, they do in later versions when the movies get
But
sequels
in
get
the
really
original,
bad,
yeah.
but the original they don't. And so Tom Strom did. Speaking of Scotland, he worked in Scotland for a while. He did Children of the Corn because it's one of his favorite horror movies, I guess. Inspired He Who Walks Behind the Rose on My Knee, and it's just kind of what he came up with. And it's just, yeah, like you're saying, it's just kind of cool to be able to run with it like that.
It's fucking cool, man. So we're gonna be rounding off, but I think this is a good way to end on kind of a like really positive note because tattoos are really like self-affirming and confidence giving, and they're a cool way of both sharing with other people that might know exactly what that tattoo is about, and also a cool way of like introducing other people, like conversation starters in a way almost. But yeah, what
Yeah.
advice would
Yeah.
you give young people wanting a tattoo?
A couple of things. I would say, like, if you're really young, like if you're 18 or whatnot, in your teens or early 20s, I would say, if whatever idea you have, wait a little
Mm.
while at least. Like, I mean, 6 months maybe isn't such a little while, but I would say somewhere around that time to really make sure that it's the image is what you want and that you really do want to make this decision because yeah, you can get like laser tattoo removal and stuff, but it is a pretty
Mhm.
significant commitment. And
Yeah.
so just really mulling it. And if you thought today, like this is the tattoo I want on this part of my body, 6 months from now you still want it, then I think, yeah, you
Yeah.
really probably want
Yeah.
it.
But how much you
But
change especially in your late teens at a very quick pace. If you want it 6 months
yes.
later, there's a good chance you might actually want it for real. Like I would agree with that.
Yeah, yeah, and like I feel like because I talked earlier about how I had this fairly long period in between when I get my first
Mm.
tattoos and then when I really started collecting, and I'm glad I did because I don't have any tattoo regrets. I don't expect I'm gonna have any tattoo regrets with my bodysuit, but I think if I'd been more impulsive,
Mm.
that probably wouldn't have been so good. Definitely research your artists
Mm.
and know that like and this is something that took me actually a while to figure out and like what the different styles are and who's going to
Yeah.
be good to do what particular
Yeah, what
project.
style you like. Like figure out that first. I would also argue, like figure out, oh, do you like new school? Do you like new traditional? Do you like fucking traditional or realism or all there's so many different styles today.
There really are, yeah. And if you can see the work in person,
Mm.
because with filters and Photoshop and whatever, and also see it healed, by the way.
Mm.
Because even if you see something in person the day it's done and it looks great, if it wasn't applied well or whatever, 6 months from now, it's not going to look very good. So,
Oh,
um, spend money.
yeah.
I mean, meaning that like you pay for what you or you sorry you
Yeah.
get what for what you pay for. So
Yeah.
it never makes any sense to me when I see people like
No,
trying to
no, no,
scrimp
no.
on tattoos.
I'm very much on the tattoo artist side often there on social media when they're like, hey, if your cousin can do it cheaper and you want to take that risk, you go to your cousin. I'm gonna be here when you come back, and want a good tattoo. I think there's something to the old saying, good tattoos are not cheap and cheap tattoos are not good. And it's not that you have that the more expensive they are, the better it is. That's a whole other separate thing for itself. But bargain hunting tattoos, not the way forward. It's way better if you really want something if you fell in love with an artist style, save up and then
Hmm.
spend that time thinking about, do I really want this?
Yes.
Can I handle
Yep.
this? Is this gonna be okay for me? Because I also think,
Yep.
and I think you're gonna agree with this, Matt, having spoken to you for about an hour now. Um, no matter where it is in your body, how visible or not, or what size it is, the first tattoo really you can feel the change in how people might view you and how you look at yourself. Like absolutely, there is something there. Like it does even change your own perception, and there's something to get used to for better or worse. Like
You're right. No, I mean it is such a profound thing to do. I mean, I had my ears pierced and whatnot before I ever got a tattoo, but yeah, like that's reversible. I mean, making such a, yeah, like I was saying earlier, like it's not like what clothes you wear, or what haircut you get, or what hair
oh no,
color if you dye your hair. I mean, it is such a profound difference. But I think part of that change is also like the commitment that you're making to yourself and what you
yeah.
believe in. That comes along with it too.
It was just, and this might be a personal thing, and I'll take the hate if anybody throws hate my way for this, but I don't mind. I like face tattoos and that. They're not my thing, but I think they can look really great on people and head tattoos and hand tattoos, especially. I love hand tattoos. Want my own hands done. I love your hand tattoos, but I very much highly would recommend not starting any of those places
Yeah.
because it is different being tattoos, and you gotta get used to how the world now reacts to you. And I think
Yes.
I've seen so many youngsters suddenly be very sad, very depressed, even because they've gotten started with hand tattoos and suddenly they can't handle the attention because they didn't think that through. For better
Yeah.
or worse, even some people where it's positive attention, they're good tattoos, but they still can't handle all that attention they suddenly get and how much people want to, like we talked about, want to touch or want to look at them or all that stuff.
It is a change. No, that's such a good point. BJ Betts did my fingers knuckles a couple of weeks ago, and he and I actually were talking about just that thing. When he's a bit older than me, but when we were growing up, if you had your head or neck or hands done, like
Hmm.
you knew that if the person was wearing a hoodie and they took it off, they were going to be look like me, like they were going to be
Yeah, yeah.
covered. Whereas like nowadays, like it seems like the younger generation, like you may see somebody like what I would call a kid, no offense, but somebody in their 20s. It's now, God, I'm so old as a kid to me. But like, they might have their hands on, they take off their hoodie, they have nothing else there, and like it's not a judgment thing. It's just like,
No,
wow,
they could be great tattoos. I just worry. Like it sounds like
yeah,
an old person. Even in my case, it's not even like it could be fantastic tattoos. You could have gone to fucking Timmy B and gotten the best like new school thing on your hands. I just as an older collector that have a lot of tattoos and have gotten used to it, even when I just got my chest and ribs done when I started out with that, worry that okay, how are you going to handle this attention and
yeah.
this change? Because of this, and it's profound, as you say. Like it's not small. Even if you get a small tattoo, it's not small. It
It's
is
an everyday
profound.
part. It's an everyday part of life. I mean, it really is. Like for
Yeah,
me, like it's something my family had to get used to. I
yeah,
talked about this in some other interviews, but like but one other thing to think about actually, especially with visible tattoos, like the effect it's going to have on those all around you too. Because I mean, and I know partly it's because I am as covered as I am, but I mean, literally every time I go out in public, at least one person, but usually multiple people will talk to me and ask questions and this, that, and the other thing. So it is, I could not agree with you more. It does
yeah.
change your lifestyle.
Well, even for me, I mean, I don't have any. I only have my arms and the chest covered and my ribs. But even I have had the experience in Copenhagen of old women clutching their pearls, when you walk by them and stuff. And even though you might not care what old people think, that's still something. No matter how tough or how resilient you might think you are to these opinions, it still touches something within you. It's still
Sure.
you still have a reaction. That we're not all made of stone in that sense.
Yeah. Doesn't feel good.
No. But ending with that bit of advice, Matt, it's been amazing talking to you, and I've really enjoyed this. Like, I've gotten to nerd out with you about tattoos in a way that I don't often get to. I love nerding out with artists and other collectors and that, but this is something special to doing it, with somebody else that knows something like more in the psychological or sociological aspects of it as well. And I just can't thank you enough for coming on. And please let people know, to those who might not know yet, where they can find you and what you might have for projects they might be interested in that. As the
Yeah.
younger people say, plug yourself, I think it's called.
No. Well, thanks. It's been my pleasure. This has been awesome. I mean, it's been such an interesting discussion. I'd love to, keep our dialogue going, honestly, because I've learned a
Absolutely,
lot
man.
from talking to you. But yeah, the ink shrink at the_inked_shrink on Instagram and TikTok. And where I'm going, I mean, I don't really know. I'm kind of taking things as they come. Opportunities like this, or being asked to like judge at some tattoo conventions, and a couple of you will talk to me about being in like documentaries, or potentially like writing a book. Paul Booth has some various ideas he's kind of thrown my way
Ooh,
for things that he might want to collaborate on. So we'll see where what the future holds.
nice, man. Right.
Yeah,
Once again, thank you, Matt. And to
thank
everybody
you.
listening in, we'll see you around, and stay tuned.